What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao, bringing you the news from Taipei. Demonstrators marched in the heart of the capital on Sunday, calling for improvements to road safety. The marchers set off from Taiwan's legislature. They are demanding reform to the driver licensing system and a process to remove unfit drivers from the roads. This rally came in the wake of a high-profile crash in New Taipei last week that killed 3 people and injured 12. Sunday's march was organized by civic groups and supported by small political parties.
我们今天主要是对交通部有提出我们的3大诉求，包含我们要求驾驶人要有全面的回训，以及我们要改革这个高龄的换照制，然后最后是我们也希望地方政府可以针对交通工程来做改善。
The protest organizers also held a memorial near the site of the New Taipei crash. The head of the Pingtung government is speaking out against a planned referendum to reactivate the country's 3rd nuclear power plant located in her southern county. The last reactor there had just been decommissioned earlier this month.
请尊重屏东人长期已经40年在核三的影响威胁之下，已经除役了，还要再走回头路吗？
That plant was shut down as part of the ruling DPP's nuclear-free homeland policy. But the opposition KMT and TPP have pushed for a public vote this August to restart the plant. The head of the TPP says people can cast their ballots then, adding that he believes many Pingtung residents support the move. The fight over referendum proposals is just one of several clashes between the legislature and the executive, held by different sides of the political aisle. For more on the current split going on in the government, Alec McDonald spoke to Kara's Templeman on our interview show Zoom In, Zoom Out.
Because of the reforms that Taiwan has gone under since democratization, I want to talk a little bit about the split between the executive yuan and the legislative yuan, and some of the more structural reasons that have given rise to this very partisan politicking right now.
The fundamental nature of Taiwan's constitutional framework now is it's basically a presidential regime, and that means there's separation of powers. That means that the executive and the legislative are elected by different constituencies, and they have what we call in political science separate survival, so they don't rely on the other side for confidence. And as a consequence of that, they both, I think, validly can claim a mandate from the voters to do what they see is the right thing to do for Taiwan. And so Lai Ching-te can say, I beat both the TPP and the KMT candidate in the last election. Therefore, I have a mandate to lead the country. The voters chose me, not the other 2 parties. But the KMT and TPP can say the voters delivered us collectively a majority in the legislature. We have a mandate from the voters to do what we think is right for the country. So there's a kind of inherent tension to this constitutional system when you get a party winning the executive but not controlling a majority in the legislature. So if we get deeper into the problem here, typically for Taiwan, over at least for the last 16 years in Taiwan, the same party has controlled both branches. It's only when you've got divided government situation that you really see this kind of inherently adversarial relationship between the 2 branches emerge again. And then that puts a lot of pressure on the other parts of Taiwan's political system to adjudicate disputes between the 2 branches, in particular the Constitutional Court. And so the Constitutional Court has then become a political football in the partisan fight between the 2 other branches.
Do you think that this division will continue, or might there be a way found back to more normalcy in the current political environment?
I think the hope for all of us should be that there are some new norms that develop about what are kind of the appropriate limits to confrontation of the other branch. Let me sound a positive note here. When we look at the previous period of divided government in Taiwan, that was an unprecedented situation for everybody during the early Chen Shui-bian era. And in fact, there was some institutional innovation that occurred during that time. Both the major parties, both the DPP and KMT, agreed to significant constitutional reforms. In an ideal world, we'd see the 2 sides recognize that this current system has some significant flaws, especially when there's divided government.
So this is a good pivot point to go actually back to last May with the first investigative powers bill. Now, this was a bill that the KMT and TPP pushed forward through the Legislative Yuan, and eventually it was struck down as unconstitutional by the Constitutional Court. Can you go into a little bit about how that bill last May eventually leads into this constitutional crisis Taiwan is facing right now?
The legislature in Taiwan has always been at a disadvantage relative to the executive branch. They can call ministers to the legislature and put them on the stand and question them in public, but they don't have the ability to sanction ministers for saying things that aren't true. They don't have the ability either to subpoena other members of the government and force them to come before the legislature and testify under oath. And they don't have the power to acquire documents. And so there's actually a kind of a fundamental problem in the Taiwan system where the executive branch has much more power and information than the legislative branch. And so I think there's a valid concern by the majority in the legislature now that they want to strengthen legislative oversight powers. And this bill that passed in May was an attempt to do that. The problem is they passed it with just a KMT majority, and there wasn't much attempt to either negotiate with the DPP caucus or the executive branch itself. And they were a bit too ambitious. They pushed the limits of what was constitutionally allowed in this bill and opened themselves up then to a constitutional court challenge. My reading of the law, actually, and certainly the Constitutional Court, who's the real experts on this, agreed that big parts of that were sloppily written, or they were written in a way that violated some fundamental principles of the system. And so I think if you had a better crafted law, we'd be in a much better place right now.
You can find the full episode of Zoom In, Zoom Out on the TaiwanPlus website. A diving group off Orchid Island has come across a special surprise, an endangered whale shark. These giants of the sea were once overfished, making their appearance these days a rare treat. John Van Trieste reports.
The members of a diving expedition off of eastern Taiwan on Saturday were expecting fantastic views, but nothing quite as spectacular as what they ended up seeing. At 14 meters below the surface, not far from Orchid Island, a rare lumbering beast of the deep approached. The whale shark is among the world's largest fish, but years of overfishing have greatly reduced their numbers, leading to them receiving legal protections in Taiwan and around the world. The appearance of such an unusual creature was a big surprise.
它本来是要游走的，看到气泡它又再游回来啊，它又在靠近我们这边。然后因为它可能本身比较喜欢玩气泡吧，所以它本身它又靠过来。
Some marine life researchers say it's not a total surprise the whale shark showed up in that area at this time of year, when the water warms up and food is plentiful.
它出现的地方的话，应该是这个浮游动物它出现的一个地方，所以就是说它可能是摄食的这样的一个行为，所以可能最近就会常出现，就是说看到鲸鲨这样。
But they say the chances of seeing a whale shark are still relatively slim. So for the 10 or so minutes the 4-meter whale shark played in the bubbles from the divers' oxygen tanks, the group's members had a privileged spectacle indeed. Fu Huahong and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
And thanks for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, we'll leave you with these black rhinos being released into the wild in Kenya to help the critically endangered species numbers. I'm Eric Gao. Take care. We'll see you next time.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.